After the exhibit closed, she asked if I wanted to take a walk. San Francisco looks best at night, she said. We walked along the Embarcadero, the bay lights dancing on the water. The air was cool, filled with salt and memory. So, she began, are you still writing about me? Always, I said. Even when I don't mean to. She smiled. Good. I've been taking your picture for years too. Just in my head. We laughed softly, then fell into silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. Finally, she said, do you ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't let go? I took a long breath. All the time. But maybe if we hadn't, we wouldn't have become who we are now. She nodded slowly. Maybe love doesn't fail. Maybe it just waits until we're ready. The hotel balcony. Later that night, she invited me to her hotel rooftop. We sat under string lights, the city glowing below, 2 glasses of wine between us. I was scared back then, she admitted. Not of you of us. You were too much like the life I wanted, and I didn't know how to stay still for it. I looked at her, really looked. You're not scared anymore. No, she said. Not anymore. There was a pause, long enough to feel everything between us breathe again. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. So what happens now? I smiled faintly. We stopped pretending timing has to be perfect. And when she reached for my hand, it didn't feel like the start of something new. It felt like the moment we finally caught up to everything we'd been running toward since that summer in 2003. The morning after. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, painting her hair gold. For the first time in 2 decades, I felt the kind of peace you can't write about, you can only live. She stirred, half asleep, and murmured, you're still here. Finally, I said. She smiled, eyes still closed. Then don't go anywhere. Promise. Months passed. I took a teaching position at Berkeley. She started a new project, portraits of people finding their way back to each other. We built something quiet and steady. Coffee in the mornings, art shows on weekends, laughter in the spaces where silence used to live. One evening, as we watched the sun dip behind the Golden Gate, she turned to me and said, you know, I used to think our story ended a long time ago. And now? I asked. She smiled. Now I think it was just an intermission. I laughed softly. A long one. The best ones always are, she said. Epilogue, the last photo. Years later, after my first gray hair and her 100th exhibit, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a photograph, both of us sitting on that same rooftop laughing at something only we knew. On the back she'd written, for the boy who taught me to stay, for the man who finally did. I pinned it on my wall next to all my awards, my published covers, my book posters. None of them meant as much as that single photo, because that picture wasn't proof that we ended up together. It was proof that we found our way home. Final part coming soon, The Shape of Forever, where Daniel and Emily look back on their love as life partners, reflecting on how real love matures, quiets, and deepens. Backhand index pointing right. Would you like me to continue with part 5, the final chapter? A deeply emotional closure, 10+ years later? It will feel like The Notebook's ending, but with a grounded, modern tone, real, reflective, and unforgettable. The house we bought sat on a hill overlooking the bay, the kind of place where mornings smelled like coffee and sea salt, and evenings hummed with the sound of foghorns and wine through the eucalyptus trees. Emily filled the rooms with light. Literally. She chased the sunrise from window to window, camera in hand, laughing every time I told her, "You've already taken 1,000 photos of this view." She'd smile and say, "Light never hits the same way twice." I think that was her secret. She never stopped noticing things most people overlooked. And I never stopped noticing her. The quiet years. We didn't live a perfect life. We argued about small things mostly. The thermostat, the clutter of my notebooks, the way she'd forget her tea on the counter, and then heat it 3 times before finally drinking it. But every argument ended with the same line. "I still choose you." That became our tradition. Not "I'm sorry," not "I love you," just "I still choose you." Because love, we'd learned, wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and mending the same heart, again and again, until it became something stronger. The book and the photograph. In 2020, I published my 3rd book, a memoir called The Distance Between Almost and Always. On the dedication page, I wrote, "For for every summer that never really ended. At the launch event, she sat in the front row, wearing that same faded denim jacket she'd worn when I first met her. When I read that dedication aloud, she smiled through tears. Later, she gave me a photograph in return. An image of us sitting on the porch, her head on my shoulder, both of us reading different books, the world fading behind us. On the back, she'd written, "We used to chase stories. Now we live one." The health scare. Life, of course, has its way of reminding you that forever is fragile. In the spring of 2024, Emily fell ill. Nothing dramatic at first. Fatigue, a cough that wouldn't go away. Then came the tests, the waiting, the words you never want to hear in a doctor's office. We faced it together. She was calm, braver than I could ever be. "Don't look at me like I'm fading," she said once, touching my cheek. "I'm just changing shape. You taught me that stories don't end, remember?" I nodded, unable to speak. She smiled softly. "Then let's make this chapter count." The last exhibit. 6 months later, she had one final gallery show. The Shape of Forever. It wasn't a grand event, just a quiet room, warm light, and her last collection of photographs. Each wall held images of everyday love. Old couples holding hands at bus stops, a child hugging their mother, a man reading to his wife in a hospital garden. In the center of the room hung one final photo. Our porch at sunset, 2 chairs side by side, empty but glowing in the fading light. Underneath, a caption, "Home isn't a place. It's the person who waits beside your chair." People cried quietly as they walked by. I stood there holding her hand, realizing she'd turned our life into art. The final morning. It was late autumn when the fog rolled in heavier than usual. She'd grown weaker, spending more time by the window, wrapped in blankets, still trying to catch the light with her camera. "Look," she said one morning, her voice soft. "Do you see it?" "See what?" "The light. It's different today." I smiled. "It's just morning." She shook her head faintly. "No, it's the one I've been waiting for." She lifted the camera, clicked once, then lowered it and looked at me. "That one's yours," she whispered. And just like that, she closed her eyes. Peaceful. Still. Like a photograph developing into eternity. After. It's been 3 years now. The house is quieter, but it's still full of her. The walls, the photos, the way the sun falls across her old chair at exactly 4:17 p.m. I still write. I still make coffee for 2. And every evening I sit on the porch and talk to her out loud. Not because I think she can hear me, but because I like to believe she still answers in the wind. Her camera sits on my desk, the last picture still inside. I haven't developed it. Maybe I never will. Some things aren't meant to be seen, they're meant to be felt. Epilogue, the story lives. A few months ago, a young reporter visited to interview me for a magazine piece titled "Writers Who Love Too Deeply." At the end, she asked, "Do you still believe in forever?" I thought about it for a long time, then smiled. "I used to think forever meant never losing someone," I said. "But now I think it just means never letting them go, even when you have to." She looked at the framed photograph behind me, the porch, the empty chairs, and whispered, "That's beautiful." I nodded. She always said light never hits the same way twice. But I think love does. That night, I opened my notebook, the same one I'd started 20 years ago, and wrote the final line of our story. When we were almost forever. We didn't know that almost was enough. Then I closed it. And for the first time I didn't cry. Because our story didn't end. Just became everything I am. Then, when we were almost forever. A love story across time.